Ferguson. Albert skorar! Albert Gunnarsson hefur skorað. Ragnar Bergjesson skorar mark! Glæsilega gert! Óskar Rafn á móti Bjarna. Og Bjarni með góða sendingu fyrir og það aftur Ingvarsson!
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Best Pod Ever. In this episode, we are actually going to go ahead and start our season preview, and we're going to be talking about three teams that, well, might be up for a very difficult season. We're going to talk about Haukau, we're going to talk a little bit about Fylkir, and we're going to talk about Vestri. So, one newcomer, two... you can't say old dogs, that's not right, but but you get my point. We're gonna discuss how we think their season is gonna go. But first, Trygvi's here. Trygvi, how you doing?
Hey Joe, I'm doing good. The season is now underway, and it was fun to see Vestri play their first game, and then I think both Haukau and Fylkir were positive surprises. So. Hopefully they won't be as doomed as many are predicting them to be. But let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, and that's a good lead-in because we're going to start with Haukau. So, they picked up a point in the first round this last weekend against Kawa, actually, which for me, and I know I mentioned this on our review show of the last episode, was a bit surprising. I think that's a good point for them. I think it could be a good point for them. But, yeah, Trygvi, what can you tell us about Haukau? How's their off-season been?
Yeah, I think this is the team that most people going into the season were maybe the most pessimistic about. They've added a few players now towards the end of the transfer window, sort of beginning of the season, but most of the talk has been about the fact that they've just sort of lost players and not really added anyone in. And it's not like they had a good end of the season. I think the general consensus is that if last season had been 2 games longer, they probably would have gone down with Keflavik. So they were quite lucky that it ended when it did, because they had a terrible end of the season, and there's nothing that's made you maybe change your mind over the postseason, and then not bring players in, losing players. So not a lot of optimism. So I think Haukau will be very disappointed to not put a home win on the board. But also, yeah, like you said, a good point from Haukau, and we'll see if they are as doomed as we say. But yeah.
So one name that has departed that really stood out to me, and it's not actually any of the two that you have here in our show notes. I think Søiberg is going to be a huge loss for them, actually. He kind of came in last season and scored a lot of goals for them. He got a little quiet towards the end of the season, but the whole team did, right? His goals are going to be a huge miss for him. And then, of course, Orvar Egertsson went to Stjarnan. Ahmad Fakwa, who I was a big fan of, he's back at AIK Stockholm, which was his parent club, so his loan ended. And then, a player that we talked a lot about on several shows because he was performing pretty well for them was Hassan Yalo, and he's actually gone to the second division to Grindavik, and they've only brought in three players, and I don't know which of these, if any of them, caught your eye, but George Nunn is an Irish player. They brought him in from England. He's an interesting prospect. He went through the Chelsea Academy, the Derby County Academy as well. So I'll be curious to see how he does. I thought, I'm pretty sure he started on the weekend actually, and I felt like he did okay.
Yeah, like 3 players they brought in, and I think maybe the name that, at least, I mean, I think I've maybe heard of George Nunn through Football Manager, maybe one of the earlier iterations, but no, I don't know him as a player. And they brought in Thorstein Aron from Valur on loan. He's a young player that's had youth caps for Iceland, very highly rated, but had some injuries. So So he's one to look out for, but he's two. That's two names that are sort of we don't know that much about, are still kind of a bit on the younger side, and maybe not that experienced in the Icelandic top division. So they're going to be depending a lot on their sort of usual three, which is Arna Freyr in goal, Atli Hrafn, and then Leifur Andri. And they all performed really well against Kawa. And I think the problem is they're really going to be depending on these guys to pull up the youngsters beside them. Yeah, the question is whether it's enough.
Okay, good. Well, that's Haukal. We're gonna leave Haukal there. Let's go down and talk about Fylkir. They've had a lot of transfers, both in and out. And I think there's a lot of people who are pretty concerned about their ability to stay up this season. Obviously, that's why we're talking about them. So yeah, Tryggvi, what are your thoughts on Fylkir?
Yeah, it's really hard to know how they're going to do. I think I was quite impressed again with them against Kauer, especially in the first half. The pressing they were doing and the general setup, I think, was pretty good. It was a very chaotic game. I think both teams are settling into their roles in the league and a little bit, but I think I was kind of impressed with Fylkir, and that's been my general impression with them over the last few years. I think Rúnar Páll, the manager, has them playing a really solid way. Has them defensively. I mean, I know they conceded 4 goals this weekend, but generally defensively they're pretty solid. As a team, they're pretty solid. Maybe the big question mark for this season is up front. I think they're sort of their main player who did again quite well. Did well last season and did well in the weekend was Benedikt Darius. Very, very talented striker, and he did really well last season, like I said, and I'm sure he'll there's be a lot of stuff on his shoulders this season. Same with Omar Björn as well. But they lost Pétur Bjarnason, who we spoke about a number of times last season.
Mm-hmm. Who went to Vestri, interestingly enough. So we'll talk about him in a sec, I'm sure.
Exactly. And they also lost Ólafur Karl, who retired. Those are 2 huge names on top of Óskar Borgþórsson, who left towards the end of last season. You could already see when he left that was a huge hole, and then taking 2 more out of that will be very hard to replace. They brought in Mathias Prast from Denmark. I thought he did pretty well against Kauer, but I mean, we don't know enough about him, to be honest. But I think everything else defensively, they should be solid. It's just a question of whether the manager can get them going up front.
Do you feel like they answered that question at all with their game against Kauer last weekend? They were able to put 3 goals away. So is that more of a fluke on Kauer's part, you think? Just kind of taking their foot off the pedal? Or do you think Fylkir actually... there's something there? There's
definitely something there. Like Benedikt Darius, for example, I think he's a really good player and really someone I'm excited to see again this summer. But as are some of the other guys. But I think if you look at the goals, even the ones that Kauer scored, apart from maybe Luke's goal and maybe the first goal as well, I think a lot of them were this very hectic, just bombing the ball forward through the defense. Maybe some of it offside. I think you mentioned off the air at some point. I think this whole game was kind of hectic a bit. I don't think you can read too much from this game. I think we really need to read into the next. They have quite a tough first 5 games. They have Valur next. We'll see how much we can read into that. But then they have IS, Stjarnan, and Fram. I think by the end of 5 games, if they haven't picked up a few points, they might be starting to look like they're in trouble.
Yeah. So Fylkir and Haukal are both the teams that you and I both picked to go down this season. I'm still sticking with that at this point. Yeah, you can't read too much into the first weekend. We need a couple more weeks to really see it and get a feel for where they're at. But yeah, that's those 2 teams might be who exits out of the league for. At least that's what we think, right?
Yeah, at least for now, and then. But it's this. I mean, the season is longer than it used to be, but it's still quite a quick and dirty league. It's over before you know it. So I think they really need to start quick and get some points on the board and settle some nerves. I think it could get a bit noisy up there.
Last question on Fylkir: How do you rate Rúnar Páll? I mean, we you mentioned earlier that he did a decent job with them last year, and he's done a lot to develop some of the younger players and set them up well defensively. You kind of talked about that. Do you think he's going to be able to deliver again?
I think so. I think he's one of the key parts of this Fylkir team. I think it would be a huge mistake, even if they get nervous, even if they don't start well. I think it would be a huge mistake to get rid of him. I don't think he can be considered a problem, at least at this stage of the game. I don't know. I think Rúnar Páll, I mean, he's won the league with Stjarnan back in the day, the league and the cup, which was and still is a huge achievement. I think they're really lucky to have him. I think he's really good. I think the way they're set up is just fantastic. I think it's just a matter of resources, to be honest.
Yeah, I think one other name I would mention, and you mentioned him earlier, but I want to come back to him. So, Orri Ruff, we talked about him a lot last season at Valor, and he put in some really nice performances for them, and I think that's a solid addition for Fylkir. And how he combines as a whole with the likes of Benedict Darius, I think is going to be pretty key for this Fylkir team as we move forward in the season. And yeah, I mean, I feel like if they hadn't pulled him in, we'd really be talking about Fylkir in a really tough spot.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be huge. There's no doubt about it.
All right, so we'll leave Fylkir there. Those are the two teams that you and I both predicted to go down. The third team that we want to talk about in this first part of a 4-part series is Vestri. And you have some close ties with Vestri from your family, so you can talk a little bit about that. But also, this is a new team to the league. They got promoted. A lot of people were a bit surprised that they were able to get that promotion, but they're also one of the most unique teams, at least to me. When I look at their squad, there's not a ton of foreign players in Iceland, but this team has quite a bit, which I think is really fun, right? They've got a player from Zimbabwe. They have 2 players from Senegal. They've got a player from Nigeria. It's for me, I think that's very exciting, right? They've got a Spaniard in their team, a Serbian as well. So, there's a couple Serbians actually. It's a very diverse squad, and I wasn't really too disappointed in their performance against Fram. I think Fram has taken a bit of a step forward this season. For Vestri, I think it was a good measuring stick in the first week for them, right? They didn't come out and have to go up against somebody like a Valor or a Vikingur or Breiðablik, right? I think Fram is more of a better measuring stick. And they only lost 2-0. So I feel like there's some promise there, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we disagreed a little bit on where they would be in the table, and I think that's very fair. I think if anyone says they know exactly where and how Vestri will be, where they'll end up and how they'll be playing this season, I think they're an absolute liar. Of course, people saw them last season, but it's just, I think with a team like this, when you have a first team, first timers in the league, and a lot of foreign players and a lot of new players, it's just almost impossible to tell. But yeah, no, it's exciting. It's they're from Ísafjörður, which is on the west coast of Iceland, which is also where my dad's family is from. So I've been there many times. I've seen Káar play there back when they had a different name. So that they had actually, the team was called BAE Bólingavik. So they've undergone a few different names, but that's quite normal for Icelandic teams, sort of in these smaller towns. So, and it's quite hard to keep up a sports team in these sort of towns. So like usually they have to combine with other towns around them or something like that, and that's what Vestri has done in the past. But it's nice to have a team from not Reykjavik. We have quite a selection now. We just need someone from the east to come up next season.
I love it. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think not many people expected them to go up last year. That was very much Afturelding's role last season. They were supposed to be the ones to go up, and I mean, they almost did. It was these two teams played in the playoff final. That was also due very much to their late run in the form. They started kind of weakly, and then they just sort of picked up steam and got going and really made a run at it and made it into the playoffs and finished off really well. Where maybe Afturelding fell off a little bit. I think that's going to be Vestri's strength, is to sort of get the group together, go on a run, and then just put their head down and keep running.
So one name that sticks out to me that they brought in for the campaign is William Eskalainen. That might be a familiar name to some of you, but they're bringing him in from Örebro, from Sweden. He'll strengthen their goalkeeper department probably is a pretty good addition, especially for this level, I would say. So I think that's a good one. Obviously, we talked about him earlier, Peter Bjarnason, right? Somebody who knows this league very well, is a proven goal scorer in the league. I think will really help Vestri's cause this year. And then I don't know if you wanted to talk about any other ones, but there are a couple additions that they also brought in. Jeppe Gertsen from Frederica. He actually played the full 90 last weekend, and they brought in some players. What do you think we can expect from Vestri?
Yeah, I think they've brought in quite well. It is a bit different proposition to be a club from the countryside in Iceland. In the past, it's been quite hard to attract players. That's quite often why maybe foreign players are more brought in, because for Ísafjörður you can't. I guess you can, but it's quite the commute if you want to live in Reykjavik and train in Ísafjörður, especially when the weather is bad. So it is about convincing players to move up there, and which is not always easy. But I think they brought in, like you mentioned, the players you mentioned, plus they brought in Andri Rúnar from Valur, on Iceland, former Iceland international. And then quite recently they brought in Eiður Aron from IPVAF, which he was a bit criticized for the first game, but I think it was his
own goal.
Yeah, exactly. His deflection from Chopard Kenny's shot. But I think they brought in quite smartly Eskilinen. Yeah, exactly. He's a name he's played in the Danish Superliga. He was first choice goalkeeper in the Swedish First Division. It's quite the name to bring in. So if these guys can really get going, if they can build a team around these quite good players, they really shouldn't be, they shouldn't be struggling necessarily, but it's also going to be an incredibly difficult season. It won't be easy. They really need to fight, and with all the traveling they need to do, and I mean it's maybe an obvious point, but it's still a point worth making. I mean, they had an accident on the way back home. After the Fram game, one of their players, Sergin Fall, he actually had to go to the hospital because one of their buses got in an accident. Thankfully, he's okay. He might even play in the weekend. But I mean, it's these sort of like things you might think are very minuscule. It does make a difference, and even just being in Ísafjörður, it's. The manager has talked about it as well, that it's, I mean, if you follow them you should definitely follow these guys on the socials, because they're just showing them clearing snow from the pitches where they're training. They can't really train properly because they don't have they have really nice pitches, but if it's snowing or like this, then it's quite hard, right? It's something they know. I mean, they know about this. They knew about this before the season started, so they've definitely planned for it, but. They're up against elements and teams like Valur and Vikingur, but I think they'll put up a fight.
Yeah, well, that's very exciting. I think we're gonna leave it there. We're gonna do this in kind of a 4-part series, so we're gonna take it 3 teams at a time. So that'll kind of wrap it up for this episode. Talked about Haukau, talked about Fylkir, talked about Vestri. Both of us have Haukau and Fylkir going down. We'll see if that actually pans out. I am rooting for Vestri to stay up for reasons already discussed. But any final words, Trygve?
Yeah, I'm very excited to see all these teams. I don't think there's a terrible team in the league that's going to go straight down without a fight. I think we're in for a really good season, if this is supposedly the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting regardless. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for joining us with this episode. This is a bit on the shorter side, but we're trying to keep it a little shorter this season where we can. So appreciate you listening. As always, please go follow us if you're not already on our socials. You can find us at Besta English on Instagram and Twitter, or X, or whatever you want to call it. And until next time, this is us. We're signing off. Talk to you soon.
Bye.